What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting live stream for round 3 of the RBC Canadian Open. Gonna break down everything that you need for tomorrow to go out there, have yourself a moving day, whether it's for showdown, props, outrights, you guys name it. Throw whatever questions that you have down there in the live chat. We'll go through all the info for you. So gonna start with a look at the weather, how that'll impact play, some of the course conditions from today, and then afterwards talk about DFS, and towards the end is when we'll talk through the prop side of things. So just giving you a little bit of a table of contents on what to expect out there. So first off, welcome on in wherever you guys are. We got Why I Win down there. Cheers to you, man. Hopefully you're having a solid Friday. And same thing with Mike Whistler down there. Hopefully you guys are ready to get after it out there for Saturday and are as excited as I am to hop into all this content. So first off, cheers for Friday, right? Whether you're celebrating or not, this live stream is probably going to be a little bit shorter than usual as I've got some stuff to get to later tonight. So live stream, I wanted to make as close to the end of play as humanly possible. So that's why we're live here at 8 p.m. And my deadline is 8:40 for a soft end time. So we've got about 40 minutes to work with here. Cheers to the weekend, like we said. Any roles for an optimizer? Yeah, we'll talk about that with DFS for sure. I'll make sure to circle back to your question, Adolfo, but cheers to you guys, what you got here. But DFS sports. So of course, here on the channel, we focus on golf, football when that comes back around, but there are plenty of other sports that you can play daily fantasy for. That includes NBA, which you got the playoffs going on right now. You got MMA going on every single week. You got NHL, MLB, NASCAR, college football, you guys name it, all over there on the Ship It Nation site. So on top of just the sports that you'll see from here on my channel, right, other pieces of content that you're maybe an expert in, right, if you want to play daily fantasy for sports where you don't have all the information, it's a great source of information. And even for someone like myself, right, I'll dabble in the NBA, MMA streets from time to time, and having a source like this to back up my intuition, right, my basic understanding of either sport is huge out there for my own process. So I think if you're somebody that especially isn't dedicating a ton of time to any fantasy sports, right, having a tout site like Ship It Nation is absolutely key, right? It saves you the time, gives you that information in a very condensed, very actionable way, rather than having to go from website to website to try and cater and find all the information. So check it out. They have great content creators over there, right? Of course, you've got Hoop out there. You've got Tambo at the head of a lot of the different sports, but a lot of their guys that they have for specific niche sports are some of the best, if not the best in the industry. I mean, you've got Lee out there with the golf rankings. Their MMA team is unmatched. They have just as strong a front over there with the MLB and NBA side. So great to be partnered out here in the channel. Proud to be a partner of the Ship It Nation. The code, if you want a discount over there, is Luke10. So it says Luke15 there. That one is a little bit outdated, but make sure to use code Luke10 if you're going out there and getting any membership. With that out of the way, let's talk about this golf course a little bit. So we're going to dive in, which today, guys, honestly, one of the worst days that I've had for a long time. And I'm not talking off the golf course. That was totally fine. It's a great Friday, actually. So we're feeling good from that perspective. But our showdown lineups were absolute horseshit today. I mean, like I said, one of the worst days that I've had for a long time. It was all the weather, right? I thought the PM would play easier. I guess that was a boneheaded mistake now out here in hindsight, but it ended up playing a lot more difficult. In fact, about 0.8 shots more difficult. So on the first day, of course, that was reversed, right? Your PM wave was the one that played easier. So over the first few days, if you played a weather edge for that PM AM wave, right, which I mentioned, I actually said on Wednesday, right, the one edge that I might see would be for that PM AM. I didn't see a 1.6 shot advantage, though, right? It was 1.65 shots between the first few rounds that you ended up getting for that side of the draw. So I certainly didn't see that coming, right? That wave played about 0.7, 0.8 shots over par over the first few days. The other wave played a whole 2.4 shots over par. So, of course, a lot of your scrubs really struggled to make the cut out of that wave. And you saw that with some of the cut line drama at the end, right? A lot of players that were dropping from just on the cut line to just out of the cut line. And that would have been a really nice wave edge to capture out there for main slate. So I didn't see that coming. I unfortunately didn't do enough wave stacking this week. Right? I always go out there and take like 5-10% and stack in either direction. But I wish I would have been more intentional, right? I wish I would have trusted my gut instinct a little bit and taken those PM AM guys. So, again, hindsight's 2020. It's really easy to say that after the fact, because last night, right, we looked at the weather forecast, and I think a lot of people agreed with me, right, that the PM wave looked easier, at least for the forecast that we had. Whether it was the course firming up today, whether it was a slightly windier afternoon than what they were calling for, all of that led to the exact opposite. So if you're here on the live stream yesterday, I obviously take responsibility for that. That is my bad, guys. But based on the forecast that we had, especially the stats from round one, right, whereas a 0.85 shot advantage, right, out there between AM versus PM, at least to me, we had no reason to believe that that same effect wasn't going to happen. So this golf course has my mind in a little bit of a twister. It's not just for DFS. For props, it's one of, first off, last 3 weeks, we literally haven't had a losing day for props until this week, where the first 2 rounds have both been losing day for props. So maybe I just don't have a grasp on this golf course, right? That is totally reasonable to say, right? That maybe it's just not my best course for a read, but we're going to keep at it. We're going to try and look at the stats, right? Correct that for rounds 3 and 4. And, mama ain't raised no bitch over here, right? I'm not somebody who's just going to lay over, say that I can't do it. Right? Obviously, it's maybe a little bit of a struggle going on, but we'll figure it out, right? Out here for rounds 3 and 4. So just wanted to address that. First off, results today. I addressed that in my tweet about this live stream, right? We're not great for round 2, but we'll definitely try and rectify that out there for moving day. In terms of a weather forecast, which we're going to do our best here. Yesterday, we got wiped out here. It looks the exact same. So the weather from today, right, we could almost copy and paste and use for tomorrow. And what I noticed about the scoring is that the best conditions, at least for today, when I was watching scoring, I was watching the play on ESPN Plus, was the late morning, right? So it was some of your later starters in the AM wave were players that really got after it wise. And just in general, I think from like 9:30, maybe to like around noon local time is where you had guys really making a lot of birdies. You had some early starters, right, have ceiling rounds out there. Hopefully I wasn't doing that for too long. Yikes. Sound is gone. When did it unplug? So it was at least 3 minutes ago. That's sick. And by the way, guys, I don't have the screen up, so you can comment muted as many times as you want. I'm only going to see it when I bring up the chat. So if you say it once, that's probably enough. I appreciate the heads up, though. But when did it go out? So if anyone could let me know exactly when I cut out, that would be great. Yeah, that's DFS. So I'm assuming you're talking about the weather from today. Yeah, it was a crazy one. You just had to have the right guys today. That's right about it. There were guys in both AM and PM you wanted. Your PM wave did give you Fox, Damon, and Olsen. There you go. So that would have been really bad. Wish you had considered the course drying out. Me too. Absolutely, me too. Everyone have a successful day? I did not. You didn't cash any PM was the right wave? No, Mike. We just talked about that. What's going on? Main lineup is dead, so you need to hit someone showdown. There you go. What's going on, Bruce? What's going on, Kurt? Let me see. Anyone let me know when it's muted. Beginning of the weather. Okay. 3 to 4 minutes doesn't help me. I need to know when it, like what I was talking about, right? So I know what to catch up on. You said beginning of the weather? Alrighty. So when I had the cut info up. Okay, there you go. Appreciate that, man. Let me circle back to the weather, I guess. Lovely start to this live stream. I apologize, guys. Obviously, there's going to be some technical issues. The jackasses in chat that are saying stuff like it's, something that I can control are just exactly that. Trolls that have nothing else to do with their lives, right? Other than troll and other pieces of content. So if that's you, I'm not even gonna read your comments on stream. I'm just gonna ban you, send you on your way, and tell you that you're just a little troll piece of shit. That's exactly what you are. All right, so let's talk about this. So now that the mic's working, excuse my language, but some people are just absolute pricks. For Saturday, it looks very similar to Friday. So that spiel that you guys couldn't hear was me essentially saying that what we saw for Friday can be copy and pasted to Saturday. Now, obviously, we didn't have a very good read on the weather situation, but based on what we saw for today, it looks like the late morning was the nuts conditions, right? It was warmer in the morning. You had more receptive greens early. I think that's why the scoring favored those morning players. And with the same kind of situation, and it's not by waves now, right? We don't just have AM versus PM wave. If I was going to target a subset of tee times, it's between about 7:30 start times to about maybe a 10:30 start time. If you're starting in that portion of the tee times, you're going to have those more receptive greens. Plus, you're going to have warmer conditions. Now, it's not a perfect science, right? I still think you can play some of the later starters if you want to. I don't think it's going to be a drastic difference in terms of conditions, but based on what we saw for round 2, which should be pretty comparable to what we see for Saturday, it does look like the morning guys get more receptive greens. And if that's going to be the case, that's a very typical thing we see out there in the PGA Tour. That's normally why we target those earlier starters. So that's it for the weather. I apologize for it cutting out. Again, if you're going to be one of those trolls, I'm just going to send you on your way. I don't really give a fuck. So that's how we're feeling out here on a Friday. And I'll bring up my projections there once again. Let's see. Let me bring those up and let's talk through this a little bit. Hopefully you could hear it that time. Yeah, I think the 50th message of me saying no sound, I probably saw it, right? You guys are something else down in chat, I'll say that much. Let me see where I actually left off with actual questions. So I know we had a question before about roles for an optimizer. It's not really a good one, Odolfo, if I'm being completely honest, for going out there and setting rules. The only thing I would focus on would be the ownership aspect, right? I'd either have a max product ownership, that's the way that I go about it, or even a max cumulative ownership, right? That's not the best method, but it still gets the job done. In terms of tee times, unless you want to force in at least 2, maybe 3 guys that are going off in that Goldilocks zone, I don't see anything that you have to place in terms of roles. The thing about roles is they can be helpful, but a lot of times you'll outroll yourself and you'll take yourself off of optimal lineups unnecessarily, right? People will set a bunch of rules in their optimizer, kind of overdo it a little bit, and they'll have no chance at ever getting to that optimal because one of their rules, and it might even be one that had no reason to be set, like there was no reasoning to even get there, that keeps you from doing so. So I wouldn't go too crazy on that. If anything, just focus on the ownership, right? Make sure that your product ownership or your cumulative ownership is set. Where are we at? Is this really down to Ryan Fox and Big Shot Bob? Probably not, Hef. The best evidence of that is Sam Burns shoots -7, right? Then shoots over par today with 4 birdies on the round. Rory McIlroy looked like a smash play, of course, goes out there and shoots over par himself. So if Rory can shoot over par, somebody that shot a 63 the day prior goes out there and shoots 2 over, I think the winning score might be like 13, 14 under. It would not surprise me if those 2 players spin their wheels the entire weekend, and it's somebody that's maybe -4, -5 right now that goes out there and wins this golf tournament. So I think it's wide open. We'll see after tomorrow, Hef. If they go out there, they shoot another 3 under par round, something like that, it might be those 2 at the top, but they've got to do it one more day. And based on a lot of the carnage that we saw this afternoon, of course, those 2, right, last tee times of the day, might be a little sketchy for them. We'll see, though. Maybe they can keep it together. I hope so. I like both players. Got to say, both guys are class guys coming over from the DP World Tour. Just good human beings, so I'm totally for it. The expensive guys failed you in Burns and Rory. I feel you on that. Yeah, a lot of my scrubs played well, huh? I had the same thing happen myself, Michael, so I empathize with you completely there. The guys up top sucked, huh? Let's see. Let's get past all the muted questions. Over, under when he checks chat. Exactly, right? It wasn't the messages that I wasn't seeing. I'm glad somebody realized that. You're confident everything I said was great. That's funny. Where are we at? Which opto do I use? So I have one that I actually coded myself. I have one for every sport that I play. Some of them are very just cutthroat, just an optimizer, about as simple as it could possibly get. My golf optimizer is the most complex that I have. Second most complex would be my NBA optimizer, which is almost completely set up for late swap to go out there and help me for that. With golf, I've done quite a bit of work with it. So it's my own optimizer. It's pretty similar to a lot of the other stuff that they have out there. I was one of the first to implement stacking waves, right? To say like, okay, I want AM guys and this stuff. That was one of the first people to do that. Now some other optimizers have added that functionality, and I have custom rules that I can set. So I can actually just write code in Logic and plug it directly into my optimizer. So rather than having to go and like click players, set rules and that kind of stuff, I can say, for example, every lineup, I want at least 2 players with sub 5% ownership. And I can just do that with the mathematical logic, right? And upload that on there. It's really good for me on that. This guy is way behind, I'm guessing. Do you think the course will be more firm? Yeah, it'll be more firm as long as they're not getting any rain, right? And yeah, as long as that holds up. You know, you mentioned the fact that they shouldn't get any rain. As long as it holds up, you're absolutely correct. And Matthew, just skip ahead, buddy. I don't want to be that guy and ban you because you probably are just getting to that section. So let's go through this. So let's go through some of our top plays for tomorrow, which without a massive weather edge, for me is mostly game theory based. And I'm going back to the Rory well. It did not serve me well out there for round 2. But if you played them for round 2, really everything stands for round 3. Right? The only reason you would jump off of Rory is if you really like some of these other 9, 10K options. The fact of the matter is a lot of these guys miss the cut, right? There's not that many options up there towards the top end of the board. So rather than having 5, maybe even 7 to 8 options that are 9K plus, we're left with a handful of them, right? Are up there from 9K plus. So the pricing is pretty soft. You can still make Rory lineups work. For me, though, it's almost out of necessity, right? I wasn't in love with playing a Burns, especially with his late tee time. Kind of like the idea of a Tommy Fleetwood. Corey Connors, I think, makes plenty of sense. But it's not like I was trying to jam these 3 in, right? If you really like this 9K range, you really like Tommy Fleetwood, I understand not playing a Rory. But for me, right, you've got to spend your salary at some point, and he is clearly the best player in this field. So as much as I want to hold a grudge against Rory for him being an absolute, spineless coward out there, right, and just bending over and shooting a couple over par, I understand that happens. It's golf. It's a wild sport. It's an extremely variant sport. And when you understand that, you give yourself some perspective, know that golf's going to be pretty wild. Very hard to predict, right? Compared to some of the other sports out there. Sometimes you'll take a chance on a bounce back from Rory McIlroy. So even in round 1 where he shot 4 under par, went out there, kind of lit the golf course on fire, he wasn't making a ton of putts. In fact, his entire front 9 were all pars out there before he kind of got it going on his back 9. I see the upside for Rory to shoot something like 7, 8 under par. In fact, he scared 59 at this golf course when he went out there and won it in 2019. And while that kind of performance is far-fetched, right? He's not going to do that. or at least it'd be very unlikely for him to go scorched earth on this golf course. Shooting 5, 6 under par is well within his range of outcomes if he's capable of shooting 9, 10 under par at this kind of golf course. So it's going to take a big bounce back. He's going to have to be a lot sharper with the iron play to go out there and shoot something low. But you saw some semblance of that, especially his back nine out there on Thursday. And the ownership is still there. So if you were hoping that you were going to get like a lower owned Rory McIlroy because of how he played today, that's not the case, right? I'll just be the first one to say that he's still going to be well over 35%. And in fact, I think is going to be closer to 45% ownership out there in some of those contests. It's not that he went out there and impressed out there in round 2. It's more so the lack of other options, right? Just because, of all those other guys missing the cuts, like a Cam Young, a few of the other guys up there, 9K plus, like Alex Noren, right, that missed the weekend. And that's why he's still getting close to 45%. Tommy Fleetwood, Sam Burns are both pretty chalky themselves. Same thing with Corey Connors. All of these sort of players are about 25% plus ownership. So it's not like Rory McIlroy is by far this like chalky option above everyone else. Guys like Fleetwood, Sam Burns are getting their fair share as well. So that's why I'm still taking the shot on Rory, even though he has the sketchiest form of all of them. And being at -2, now I'm not sure if we have all the tee times dropped at this point, but let me see over here. I'm assuming that he has like a perfect tee time because of his score. So just to double check on that, they're actually teeing off a little bit later than I expected. So they're going off at 9:25 for your first tee time. So the guys that are getting the biggest advantage are some of the guys that just hardly made the cut. So I might have to adjust my player pool a little bit to account for that. Obviously, these hadn't dropped by the time that we went live. So I thought they were going to start at like 7:30, maybe 8 a.m. local. But I guess because only 69 guys made the cut, they could afford to go off a little bit later. Rory's actually going off at noon, which I don't know. The tee time's actually not as great now, right? I thought it would be about 2 hours earlier that he'd be teeing off. But now the guys that I think are seeing the biggest advantage, and I'll just share my screen so you guys can see the tee time setup, are the guys that are going off pretty much as soon as you start. So if you're starting out here in these like first 4 or 5 groups, you're going to have those more receptive greens, and you're going to have next to no wind for your entire round. So a Hostler kind of sticks out. I like him for tomorrow to begin with. I also like an Adam Svensson. So I like that he's going off early. You can say the same thing about Kevin Yu. I think that's interesting. Shane Lowry there, already mentioned him. Who else? There's Chesson Hadley, Johnny Vegas, another player getting that advantage. And I'd say even these guys out here to like 11 a.m. So your Adam Scotts, the players like a Michael Kim here, I would include in this sort of range, are still probably getting those receptive greens. Now, because they're starting later, it's worth noting, right, that your last tee time is at 3:25. So guys like Robert McIntyre, Ryan Fox are going to be playing on like a baked out golf course. So while the advantage in quotes out there for the earlier starters is minimalized, right, because they're going off a little bit later, these later starters are going to be playing in an extremely difficult golf course, right? Like normally they're teeing off by like 1:30, maybe 2 local time. They're going off the whole way at 3:25. And I'm assuming, right, it's still Eastern time over there, right? Yeah, they're on Eastern time. So it's not like we're an hour and ahead over here on the East Coast. This golf course is going to be significantly firmer than what you have with the morning guys. And I can't see myself playing anyone that's starting from like 2:20 and later. I think the latest starter that I'm personally playing in my Showdown lineups is Eric Van Rooyen. And Eric Van Rooyen, you can see, is starting at 2:10 local time over there. That's where I'm cutting it off. And you can see even like Tommy Fleetwood there at -3, right? He's got a 1:25 tee time. Not nearly as early as what he would normally have if they were starting earlier in the day. So that's a little bit of a curveball that I wasn't necessarily expecting. It's not going to completely change my player pool or anything, but maybe some of the guys I was taking in this range of the board, so around this Rory Tom Kim group, right? Guys like in this Pendrith range, the whole way down to maybe even like this Ryan Palmer Akshay group, I might be taking some of my exposure in this range in moving it to those super early starters, right? Because I thought they might be teeing off a little bit too early, right? Some of these early guys, but now they're starting at 9:30 a.m. So I think a lot of these guys come into play. I don't think I have Kevin Yu in my player pool as of right now, but there's a good chance I add him to my player pool. Gary Woodland, I'm not sure if I had him before, but there's a good chance I add him to the player pool. Nate Lashley is probably somebody I consider. Kelly Craft. is probably on my radar now too. And even like a Mav McNeely, like I didn't like him because he's a little bit overpriced. But now that he's got the seemingly best tee time or one of the better tee times of the entire day, maybe I do consider him out there for my showdown lineup. So again, you just got to pick your narrative, right? Obviously, I was wrong out there for round 2, but when you get it right, that's where you can go out there and really do some damage out there in your showdown lineup. So that's what I'm looking for, right? Are those slightly warmer conditions, also those more receptive greens. And you get that with a lot of the players that we're going to talk through here. So I already mentioned Rory. Shane Lowry is now an even better play than I was looking at before. I was kind of worried about the temperature with him because it was going to be a little bit cooler at like 7 a.m. But now that he's starting at 9:30, 10, I think he's at a perfect spot to go out there and go low. So 16.4%, I still have him getting some ownership, but compared to other guys up there at the top, he's a significant price decrease compared to guys like an Aaron Rye or any of those top 3 that I mentioned before. I've also got Tom Kim, so he's teeing off alongside Rory McIlroy. I thought that he'd have a better tee time than what he actually has, so I still like him. I'm still going to be playing him out here for tomorrow, but at 16.8%, I was going to come here and say, like, oh, he's teeing off at 10 a.m. It's going to be a perfect tee time. Now he's going off a little bit closer to noon, like I said before. Still better than the later starters, right? Still better than your leaders. They're going to be playing on a much firmer course, but not nearly as good a play as I was hoping to, go through about 10 minutes before we went on live stream here. Same thing with Akshay. Akshay's in that same portion of the leaderboard. So at $8,300, I'll still be playing him, but maybe was a better play before when the tee times I thought were going to be pushed up a little bit. Down here with Nikolai Højgaard at -3, he's actually going off a little bit later than I would like at this stage. So there's a good chance, by the way, and I'm actually going to say I'm not going to play him for tomorrow. This is going to be something I change after we get off live stream here. But I'm going to change him to Kevin Yu, right? I'm going to take my Højgaard exposure. I'm going to move it to Kevin Yu because Kevin Yu more so has the tee time than I'm looking for. So there are going to be some adjustments to be made, but guys like Hostler, I now like even more than I liked before. Let's see. I already have Svensson, so I'm already playing him. I don't have to adjust anything there. But like Nate Lashley here, even Harry Hall or Kelly Craft here in the bottom end of the 7s, I think are very much so in play now that we know the tee time situation. Victor Perez at -2, another guy that I was going to be higher on before, right? Especially if the tee times weren't moved back, but still pretty decent play. I'm still going to play Pearson Coody. I just think he's way mispriced. I think he's just a better player than DraftKings realizes, or even some of the other sportsbook out there kind of realize at this point. Pearson Coody, his brother Parker, are legit. They're here to stay, and they're going to be here for a long time. So if you're giving me a $6,900 price tag, I'll buy that all day. $6,600 Michael Kim, so he's at -1, has now like the nutted tee time, right? Now that he's going off at like 10:30 local. So love him at like 2.7%. And outside of that, there's not a bunch of 6K options. You can see towards the bottom end of the 6K range, almost all of them miss the cut. In fact, the 6K range is mostly just from 6,500 and up, right? You can see most of the players that are even starting with the 6K price tag are all guys at the top end of the range. So there's not a lot of punt options that you can take, which does limit the upside of taking Rory McIlroy, right? There's not as many guys you can just take at the bottom end of the pricing, which is why I have to mix in guys like a Michael Kim at $6,600. So almost all the guys I'm taking that are starting early are going to be those scrubs with the perfect tee times. And just to give you an example, Gary Woodland is a guy that I'm going to have to consider adding to my exposure. Chesson Hadley, I mentioned that one before, but even towards the bare bones bottom end of the board here, like maybe like I'm playing Vincent Norman out there for tomorrow, but like he's another option that you can mix in for some of that salary savings to play those Rory McIlroy lineups. So it's a little bit weather based when I'm going out here for tomorrow. But what you noticed is that outside of Rory up top, right, was anyone chalky? Right? No. You had guys like Lowry at 16%, right? Tom Kim at 16%, are average, if not below average ownership out there in their respective price ranges. Heck, even like an Akshay at 15% is pretty average, all things considered. And then down here in the 6 and 7K range, it was almost all lower owned options. The highest owned option that I took down here in the 7Ks was going to be Højgaard, and now that's going to be a low owned Kevin Yu, who I have at sub 5% ownership. So that's the slate for me. Again, I see maybe a 2-3 hour window of tee times where you're going to get that kind of advantage. And just to circle back over there to the Google Chrome to show you guys that again, I would cut it off around noon. So the guys that are starting at noon, you see Tom Kim, Rory right around that tee time. This Victor Perez range, right? Maybe you include Akshay around that at like 12:30. This and before are the guys that I would say are getting a slightly softer golf course. The earlier they're going off, the better. So obviously the players that are starting at like 9:40 are going to get a bigger advantage compared to the guys that are going off at like noon. But even the guys at noon are going to have a better golf course than these guys going off at 3:30. So there's kind of just like different levels, right, to the weather edge that you can have. And like the in-between guys, right, are in between. So like the guys that are going off at 10:30, right, obviously not as good of conditions as the guys going off super early, but also slightly better conditions than the guys going off in the middle end of the day. So hopefully it gives you an idea of how you can look at this kind of slate. And again, a little bit of a curveball thrown in with the late start, but I like it, right? It's going to put a lot of pressure on those later starters. They're going to have to sit around all day, just kind of like twiddle their fingers a little bit and figure out what to do with themselves. That combined with the firm conditions is probably going to lead to some carnage out there. So I'll circle back. I'll bring up our projection sheet once more. We'll go over any last second DFS questions. And then after that, talk about props, because like I said, I got to get out of here in like 15 minutes. So we're going to have to do this rather quickly. Is this a membership only stream? Nope. I don't do those. I post all the free content out here on YouTube. All the content that you see in the videos is posted on Patreon. So obviously there's a lot that's blacked out. That's where the membership gets. Obviously, everything that's blacked out on there, my entire player pool. And the guys that we talked through are far from my only players. In fact, it's probably about a third of my player pool, if not closer to a fourth of my player pool that we talked about. So yeah, a lot of stuff that we aren't talking about here because that's on the Patreon page. Do I think Adam Scott shoots better than 69? He tees off in the AM. What's his line? 69.5? I think there's a chance he does, but that seems like a pretty accurate line if you ask me. I'm not really in prop mode yet, so save that question for when we get there. Have hole positions been released? That's a great question. I don't know. Let me bring it up. So let me go over to Twitter and bring up the PGA Tour.com's Twitter real quick, and I'll let you know. They may have. They might be waiting a little bit. Oh, they're already up. Look at that. So yeah, they're up. We'll go through it when we talk about props, because it'll be a little bit more pertinent when we get to that section of things. But yeah, they were posted in about 30 minutes ago. Okay, let's bring those back up for you guys. What about Rory? You're saying Rory to win the event or something? Not sure what that's referring to. Would you just play Mac Elroy in a single entry and move on? Probably. I'm going to take other people in my single entry, but if you were leaning that direction, I'd have no issues with that, right? I don't want to tell you who to play Deacon. I'm not going to play him in my single entries, but you could. If Kevin Yu learns how to putt, hello world, that is damn right. And that's always the case with him, man. He's a really good ball striker, very consistent there. Has Lowry been putting this week, or how has he? Has he reverted back to losing strokes to the field? Wouldn't surprise me if he has, right? That's probably why he's not been popping over the first few days. But just to give you the statistical answer, he putted well round two, actually gained 1.7 strokes today. And then in round one, he was a neutral to the field. So not really, right? It's actually been the ball striking that's been holding him back, which I don't know. I don't know whether to be encouraged by the fact that he's making putts or discouraged by the fact that he's not doing his normal ball striking thing. So yes, believe it or not, no, it's the exact opposite. Hubbard or Batia? You're leaning Hubbard. I'd go Batia. Missed the stream last night and got destroyed. Who's the bounce back player for tomorrow? Well, if you missed the stream, good thing you're here this time around, right? So you can actually hear our takes for it. Who's the bounce back player? It's a good question. I don't know. It's a good question. Haven't seen the shots gained putting ranking this high in a while. Yeah, for who? Shane Lowry or something? Again, you got to include the player you're talking about, boss. I don't know who you're referring to. Andrew Novak, top 10 at plus 100. Plus 100 for somebody that's up there in the top 10 so far is not enough juice. I would definitely stay away from that. Appreciate you starting the show like you did, of course, Denny. Great pivots, Luke. Appreciate all your hard work. Appreciate you, Thomas. Yeah, I'm assuming it was Siri or something. Mac Elroy. Like I say, that's a funny way to spell the name. I like when you spell McElroy, but the only capital letter is the L in McElroy because he's always taking L's. But yeah, the McElroy was a good way to do it too. Oh, just general shots gained putting ranking. I don't know what you're referring to still, if I'm being completely honest, boss. You might just want to like fully say whatever you're trying to say because I'm lost with what you're trying to say. All right, let's build a lineup or two together. Then let's go over to props. So this live stream has been a complete shit show. So I apologize, guys, partially because of the commenters, if we're being honest. But let's go through this. So if we're building a lineup together and we're going out there and just thinking through your strategy for tomorrow, there's not a massive weather influence. Like I said, like there's a part of the tee times I think you're going to get the slightly better side of it. But for me, it's more so just about the ownership. So up top, you kind of got to make your decision on Rory, right? Whether you're going to play him or drop down a little bit, or whether you're going to be more balanced. So right off the bat, I think you should make that decision. And for me, a lot of my lineups are going to be more balanced, especially my single entry lineups. So I'm going to start there. I'm playing Rory. He's probably going to be like 40, maybe 50% owned for me. But the other half of my lineups are going to be where I'm taking that more balanced approach. And if you're taking that more balanced approach, I think your life becomes a lot more simple. So if we're starting with somebody like a Shane Lowry, I think he's a great starting point, especially if you're trying to keep it more balanced. Guys like Adam Scott are at the perfect portion of the tee times. You could throw in a Bhatia. I think Pendrith might have a big round in them too. And you can see we're still at 7,800 remaining. So if you're fading Rory, you can play 4 guys that you're going to feel wonderful about in your lineup. So I'm going to throw EVR in there. I know he's a little bit of a later tee time, but I have a little bit of a soft spot for EVR out there tomorrow. So I'll throw him in there. And then for our last man in, we can't click all 6 players into a lineup, but we want to do one last little check before we go out there and submit this lineup, right? Do we have enough leverage? So you got Lowry, who's about medium ownership. I'd say the same thing on Scott Bhatia. So we don't have any mega chalk at this stage to the first 3 players, but also no true pivots. I'd say the same thing about Pendrith, even EVR, right? All these sort of players are still garnering some ownership. So for our last man in here, you want to make sure that this guy's probably sub 5%. At least if you're entering in the large field GPP, this last spot is going to be where you're getting a majority of your leverage to the field, and especially where you're getting unique to the field. So rather than taking a chalkier option like maybe a Sean O'Hare or even a, let's see, there's not that much chalk in this range. Like I guess Pearson Cootie, right? If you went down to $100 left on the table and you took him, like maybe he'd be garnering some ownership. Maybe even like a Stuart Sink at -4, right? He's a little bit better off in terms of the ownership angle. This is where I'd go in and take like a Gary Woodland. This is where I'd go and force in a low-owned Chesson Hadley, right? He's going to be like sub 5% and try and avoid some of the guys that are closer to 5 to 7%. So this kind of lineup, right, it looks like you have pivots across the board, but because it's more balanced and you don't have any forced in 6K guys that are sub 5%, your last man in down here is really going to matter. And guys to avoid, I guess, right, if you were taking a super chalky guy that's like 10% down here, that's where you would run into trouble. And just to sort this by score, I guess, to find some of those players, like a Joel Damon, right? If you finish this off with Joel Damon, that would still be leaving $300 on the table. I don't know if we have enough leverage to the field there, right? Like everyone in your lineup is 10% plus ownership if you were to take somebody like him. So I would kind of avoid that, right? Sean O'Hare already mentioned, even a Zach Blair here at -5, any of those kind of players, it'd be where you'd be getting a little bit hairy when it comes to the ownership angle. So I point that out just to show you that it might be a little bit harder to get different if you take that balanced approach, but you can take 6 players that you're going to feel really good about. If you start with Rory, it does force you into the 6K range, which has its added benefits. So I'm going to start with a Rory, second man in. I'm going to throw in Mav McNeely here, obviously an earlier starter that I think has the better side of the draw. I'm going to throw in a Kevin Yu into this lineup. I'm going to throw in a Svenny there too. And now we're down at $6,700. So what that does is it forces us to take somebody that's going to be super low owned. So maybe it's Vince Norman, right? I know I mentioned him a little bit earlier. Your last man in at $6,700, maybe $6,800. Maybe it's a Ches Reavie, right? Who's relatively low owned. It forces you to take 2 guys that are going to give you that leverage. So even if you pair Rory, right, who's chalky himself with some other chalkier options. So let's say instead of McNeely, we went to a slightly chalkier, like Corey Connors or something like that, because we have to take a Norman and then another 6K player, you're probably going to get away with that. So that's why I'm okay still playing a chalky Rory McIlroy, right? It's all about lineup construction, right? It's all about the combinations of players that you're mixing in. So while on the surface, it looks very ugly, right? Playing a 40% owned player, the combination of players with him are going to just give you that lower product ownership. So that's what I would say about using Rory, is that he has his added benefit, because he's so expensive, of forcing you to get different than a majority of your other builds. If you're going more balanced about it, right, just go with your normal traditional game theory. But that's how I would approach it out there for round 3. Let's see. Do I know the percentage of 6 of 6 lineups? So I'll show you right here. So Cut Sweats, by the way, shot. Follow Cut Sweats if you haven't already on Twitter. They're the best place to get that information. And you can check it at any point. But here's the spreadsheet for this week. They've got it at about like 6%, 6 of 6. So you can see, depending on the contest you're in, right, it varies a little bit. So these first two are the 2 big GPPs. They've got that at about 6%. This purple is the cash lineups. So your cash contest would be this gold here, this orange, and this purple right here, this lighter purple. Those actually had a lower 6 of 6 percentage than what you had in some of your GPPs. So I kind of like to look at that sometimes, by the way, to see like which types of lineups have the highest amount of 6 of 6s. Because if it's the cash lineups that have the 6 of 6s, it usually means that the really chalky value plays all got there, right? Whereas if the GPP lineups are all the ones with the higher 6 of 6 rate, that's a lot of times when it's more of a random week, right? When some of your randoms end up making the cut. Just, I don't know, something that I like to look at from time to time. But yeah, Cut Sweats. And I'm going to throw this. I'm going to throw a link to this down in the chat so that you could follow them. Because like I said, you want to follow these guys so that you can do it yourself, right? So you don't have to ask me for it. Because I know for me, it's a big part of my process. So I can't imagine not using it. It's super helpful. That's all I've got for DFS, though, guys. So if you're just here for DFS, go ahead, smash that like button on the way out of here. And, of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything to come. Round 4, we're doing another live stream tomorrow night. So probably around 8, maybe a little bit later, maybe closer to like 8:15. Either way, going through all the action out there for Sunday to get you ready for that final round of action. So don't miss out on that, right? Make sure to stop on by for that live stream. And of course, best of luck out there with your exposure. But still going to talk through all that stuff over there for props. So not quite done over here on the live stream. But I know some of you guys just stop by for DFS, which is totally understandable, right? If you're not a prop bettor. And wanted to make sure I was able to properly say goodbye to everyone. So let's do that. Let me bring up my prop averages so that we can go through those together. And we'll switch gears a little bit and figure out what we're going to do for that side. So I've got my prop averages up. Let me share our screen and let's hop into that side. So here are the prop averages from round 2, which actually played harder than round 1, which was not expected. Again, that's why we didn't have the best showdown day. We didn't have the best prop day. But here's what we had from today. 0.79 over par. Birdie average was about 3.14, so pi birdies per round. Bogey or worse average was 3.73. Fairways hit 7.79, and your green average was 12.18 per round. Now, I've got to get out of here real quickly. Look at this. The Underdog people giving me the runaround with the withdrawal message. Let's see. I guess it went away over there. But yeah, I asked them about a withdrawal that I put through like 3 days ago that they still haven't gotten to. And of course, it's the, please give us 48 hours sort of thing, which is just bullshit. I've had withdrawals over there in Underdog take 5 minutes before, right? So obviously when it's not going to take 5 minutes, I'm going to ask about it. And naturally, they just roll their eyes and give you the runaround. So, terrible customer service, honestly expected with that kind of website. But let's see what we got here for an Underdog board. Speaking of, I also want to look at Draftkings. Let me see if Draftkings has any odds posted. And then same thing with Caesars and I guess FanDuel too. Might as well just bring up all 3. My mic may unplug. If it does, I'll plug it back in, guys. I'm going to double check on it. Don't worry. So, it looks like we're still good, surprisingly enough. So, all right, here's FanDuel. Let's see if they have anything posted. My guess is that some of the sites do. So, yeah, it looks like we got it over there in FanDuel. Let's see what they have on Prize Picks. No, sorry, not Prize Picks, Caesars. Oh, golly, I'm getting ahead of myself over here. And here's DraftKings. So yeah, DraftKings is the only one not to have them posted yet, which is okay. They're a little bit behind. But yeah, these other sites do have comparable odds. So Mackenzie Hughes, even money at 69.5. That's where his line is. Same thing for Tom Kim, but he's juiced a little bit under. 67.5 for Rory again. I tend to agree with that. Sam Burns, 69.5, juiced under. 68.5 for Fleetwood. Okay. So they're a little bit more bullish on him. And let's see what we have on FanDuel. So Shane Lowry, juiced under at 69.5. Same thing for Tom Kim. So similar number there, right? Same thing for Tommy Fleetwood. Let's look at some of the other ones. So a lot of 69.5s, 70.5s for some of your more mid-tier to lower tier players. And then do they have birdie lines posted? That's the other aspect. I'm assuming they do. They have fairways to compare later for when we have those. But let's look at these birdie lines. So 3.5 and juiced over. So look at this, right? Their strokes lines are close to even par, but these birdie or better lines are like minus 140 towards the over. So that's interesting. Minus 145 for Tom Kim, minus 165 for Sam Burns. Yeah, that only minus 150 for Fleetwood. So that's why I thought the change between him being at 68.5 and 69.5 for the other players was kind of weird. And then some of your later starters, right? So McIntyre, Joel Damon is in contention. These guys are actually juiced way under. So it kind of looks like they're accounting for the weather situation, maybe some of the pressure involved with being in contention too. So let's refresh that. Price Pick's still lacking with the board, which might end up being the case for this live stream. But let's see what we've got here in Underdog. So Aaron Rise at 3.5 at 69 strokes. Sam Burns is at 4 birdies at 68.5. Mackenzie Hughes, 69 strokes. Keith Mitchell, 69 and 3.5. Hostler, same exact projections. McIntyre's at the same number. So 90% of the board all have the same projections. And then the guys that are just a little bit better, so like Tom Kim, Burns, Fleetwood, are all just 0.5 strokes better and 0.5 birdies higher. So this is as cookie cutter a board as you could possibly see. They essentially just copy and pasted projections and adjusted them by 0.5, which means there's going to be some value here, right? Like obviously these projections aren't going to be accurate for every single player. So you got 69 there. Okay. So in terms of tee times, I do like some of the earlier starters. I was kind of hoping that they'd have Lowry at like 3.5 birdies or something, or maybe even 69 strokes, but unfortunately we're not going to get that. But maybe we can find some of the other earlier guys. So just for reference, who else has an early tee time? So Hostler would fit that. So maybe it's an over on Hostler birdies. Who else? And is that it? Is it really him and Lowry for early tee times? Because pretty much everyone else is from noon onwards. I guess Adam Scott, he's a 10:55. So that's an early-ish tee time. Yeah, then Shane Lowry's at 10:10, and that's pretty much about it. Ooh, okay. What was Rory's birdie line at? This is where I'm getting intrigued, right? He's 1.1x for the over. So look at this, right? Birdie or better for Rory. He's at 4.5, and he's minus 130 over, which means that side is favored. Over here in Underdog, right? He's 1.1x. Okay, so Rory's definitely going to be a play, and I'm going to take him for birdies, right? He's got a lot of room to make up, so you know he's going to be aggressive. So it's between Hostler and Adam Scott. If I was going to put in a slip right now, again, I got to run right now. I'm getting a bunch of texts. My phone's ringing and stuff, so I got to get going here, guys. But in terms of the value that's available right now, based on these pin locations, which I haven't fully broken down yet, I brought the tab down. That's my apologies. Let me bring those back up for you guys. I don't think the pin locations were that bad. Right, we brought up the cut sweats, so that's why I guess it got taken off. But here it is. So holes, and let me double check on which one are the par fives because I don't want to get that wrong. But it's hole number 4 in 17 that we want to really double check on. So 4's actually got a little bit of a tricky pin. 17's a really easy pin location. 5 is a drivable par 4, and that's at the front. So that's probably the easiest pin location for that hole. And then I think it's 10's also really short too. So that one's not going to be quite drivable, but it's also a pretty straightforward pin location. So I don't have enough time here in live stream to go pin by pin, bring up all the slopes and go through them. But for moving day, 99% of the time, they put pins in bowls, right? They put them at some of the simpler spots on greens. And it would not surprise me at all if that was the case out there for moving day. So I'm going to wait to enter a lot of my exposure until I can confirm that. But assuming that these pin locations are easier, the over on Rory for sure I'm going to like, right? Even if the pins are pretty straightforward or not as easy as I think, I'm going to still take the over on Rory. But Adam Scott, Beau Hossler, if these pin locations are going to increase the birdie average, then they're no-brainers, right? Because Adam Scott, Beau Hossler are better than your average players at making birdies. If I was going to just try and enter something right now, it'd probably be these two, right? I trust Adam Scott a little bit more than I trust Beau. If you take these two, you get that 3.03x payout. So pretty decent payout there. You're not getting a huge ding for the correlation, right? Because we're still taking two overs on birdies together. And because it's 1.1x on Rory, which I think is a mistake, you're getting that slightly better payout. So that's what I would recommend for props. I'll bring up pick 6 real quick. Again, I literally got to run, guys. So we'll do this as fast as possible. But in terms of pick 6, I haven't looked at this board at all yet. They normally have some pretty decent value. So we might as well take a look. So 68.5 for a lot of players, and then 67.5 for Rory and Corey Connors. That's a pretty lame strokes board. Let's look at the birdie board. 4.5 for a lot of players is quite the decision. And then 3.5 for everyone else. I like the over on Lowry at 3.5. That's one that sticks out, I guess. And then let me find you one more over on birdies. But Tia's not the worst idea, but I want to try and find somebody teeing off just a little bit earlier. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember tee times. Svensson, right? I know Svenny's got a pretty early tee time. Taylor Pendrith, you could say that too. So maybe we just take all 3 of them. All right. So these would be my 3 favorite props on pick 6. You can't enter this as a slip because you have to have overs and an under. So maybe I find an under on strokes that'll work. You know, a Fleetwood, right? Maybe you just mix him in for an under on strokes. It's a tough board. I don't know. I can't play over here myself, so it kind of makes it pointless to take a look at everything. But if I was going to do anything, yeah, it'd probably be these overs on birdies, and then maybe even an under on like Keith Mitchell birdies. Like I know Mitchell, by the way, I've taken his over on birdies the first 2 days, and he's hit for me. But 4.5 is it's asking quite a bit. I'd even consider like a Connors under on birdies, but that also anti-correlates things, which you don't love, right, for your other 3 spots. So yeah, if there's a best way to do this, like maybe it is that under on Keith Mitchell. Outside of that, it's just trying to find an under on strokes. The value on these is not going to be there, right? A lot of these lines are pretty trash compared to what you have for other categories, but you could probably find somebody to make it work, right? Like Tommy Fleetwood to shoot -2 is not the craziest thing. Same thing with Sam Burns. If there's anything for pars that you really like or anything that really stands out there, maybe you could go in that direction. But this is the most volatile category in history. If you're going to compare it, though, you do have odds that you can use to compare. So if you go over here, right, you can see that you have like the number of pars over here. And let me see if I can just find one. So Tom Kim, so Sam Burns, look at this. He's -165 for under 11.5. I bet you he's at 11.5. Yeah, look at this, right? He's at 11.5 on pick 6. So I don't really know how they calculate these pars or better odds. In fact, I don't know how to play them at all. But if you just want to play it based on the sportsbook odds, there's probably some unders or some overs that you can take in that category to make it work on pick 6. So let me see if there's any prop questions. If not, we're done with this. Let's see. All right. Absolutely, Jason. Appreciate you for stopping by the live chat. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for this live stream. Appreciate you guys down in the live chat as usual. Best of luck out there with your exposure for Saturday. Hopefully you can make it a good one and go out there and profit on both sides of things. It's been a round 1 was pretty good for us. Our outrights are looking pretty decent to this stage, but would like to make it a good showdown day and would like to actually profit on props for once. So hoping to get back into the driver's seat on those sort of things, but looking forward to it. Best of luck out there, like I said before. And only thing I ask before you hopping out of here, guys, is to smash the like button for me. So make sure you go ahead and do so. Subscribe if you guys haven't already, and I'll see you guys for that round 4 stream.